So I think I'm still waiting on a theme song, some kind of something by the Wings. We could do by the Wings. Welcome to the Wings on Katella podcast, episode four. Episode four, Quattro. I am Taylor Blake Ward, managing editor at The Sporting Tribune. We have a few guests with us, the regulars, the boys. We've got Zach Kavanaugh, who covers the Anaheim Ducks for the Sporting Tribune. Zach, how you doing, man?
I'm doing good, man. You know, it's a day off for the Ducks today completely, so day off for me, which is rare at this point in the season. So happy to have it.
Attaboy. And another day off, Jack Janes out in Arizona. Jack Janes covering the Los Angeles Angels for us here at the Sporting Tribune. Jack, how you doing, pal?
Like you said, day off. Haven't had that in a long time, so pretty good. Catching up on my laundry and cleaning up the apartment and stuff like that.
Attaboy. Well, my day off comes tomorrow, but the problem is, if you could not tell by the hat, it is freezing cold and snowing and lightning and thunder. So I got the works. I'm actually going to toss a hat. I knew I'd wear this just to be real impressive. You know, one of those stupid things. And now you can see my ugly mug, and I'll throw on the other cap. So go Gophers. Speaking Gophers, hockey, we're going to start, if you're unaware of the podcast, I think we need to give another introduction. This is the Wings on Katella podcast. We cover the Anaheim Ducks. We cover the Los Angeles Angels, all for the Sporting Tribune. You can check us out at www.thesportingtribune.com. We cover Orange County sports. We have fun with it. So Thomas Murray is joining us. Thomas Murray does also cover both the Ducks and the Angels for the Sporting Tribune, utility man. But we're going to start with Zach Kavanaugh. Now, Zach, we're going to talk some Anaheim Ducks. Rough March, really rough start here to March. 2-5-0. One of those wins against Edmonton, which is a positive, but 2-5-0. Up next, they've got St. Louis, which we're going to come back to, Dallas, the ever so loved Nashville Predators. They do have them at home tomorrow, but then they finish their road trip this time next week in Nashville. I want to start with St. Louis because we didn't get to this really deeply last podcast. You mentioned Cam Fowler. You went up to El Segundo, talked to Cam. Tell me a little bit about Cam and his return to Anaheim, and also we'll start previewing the next four games as well.
Yeah, I mean, Cam obviously the longest, second longest tenure in terms of games, longest tenure in terms of minutes played for the Ducks before he got traded last December at 991 games with the franchise, which is a little rough. You wish he could have got all the way to the 1,000 mark, but he gets to play his 1,000th game in the Winter Classic, scored 2 goals. He's having a fun time. As far as his reception, I mean, it was as expected. Like, they had a thing before the game privately with the Samuelis, and they gave him another painting, and Getzlaff and Niedermeyer were there to just, celebrate him on his first night back to Anaheim. And he was genuinely touched by that in his post-game comments, that because Getzlaff lives in Nashville now, so for him, and he works for the Department of Player Safety, so for him to come back was nice for Cam. And then Cam went on to have 2 assists on the evening around his standing ovation by the crowd, which rightfully deserved. And the game itself was an unfortunate result for the Ducks, as they've seen in a couple of these games where they've lost 4 of the last 5, and 3 of those games have been against the teams they are directly competing for, in theory, for a wild card spot. In St. Louis, Vancouver was a loss in there as well, and then to Utah last night. So for the night for Cam, it was great. I think the fans gave him the standing ovation he deserved. I thought it maybe should have even been longer. He seemed genuinely touched by the whole thing, and it was good timing because when I was in El Segundo, I had talked to him. His wife was pregnant at the time, and he said, "Oh yeah, she could go any day now." And the morning skate I was talking to Ali Lozoff, the Ducks sideline reporter, who's also pregnant, and she said, "No, I was texting with Cam's wife. She said could be any day." It was literally the next day. So if that baby had decided to come any earlier, he would have missed his big night. But he still got to have his day in the sun with the Ducks.
That would have been something else. I want to give a shout out to our good friend Michael Huntley. That did occur with him last year. I think he was covering a game, and they had a we're going into labor almost feeling kind of thing. I don't think it happened, but shout out Michael Huntley. And yeah, you mentioned it. Cam Fowler, the longest ice time tenured Anaheim Duck ever. And rightfully deserved. He deserved a standing ovation. You mentioned something this time last week, we were talking about the Anaheim Ducks potentially in a playoff spot. And I even think I asked you the question, could they even catch the LA Kings in a miracle sense? But in a miracle sense, could they have caught the Kings? That was coming after a loss to Vancouver. I think they were 7 points out of a wild card spot and like 10 points away from the Kings. Right now, they are 9 points off of a wild card spot. When it comes to LA Kings, I'm not even going to mention how far out they are. But like you said,
8 points for the wild card. But yeah,
8 points. Is it 8? Man, my math is so good. That's why I'm a writer. I'm so good at this.
Ducks are at 63, and then Calgary,
70.
Vancouver, both at 71. Yeah.
71. And the Ducks do not have a game on Calgary. They're matched up with Vancouver. I don't want to rule something out in March here, but when we're looking at this, they have to beat Nashville twice. They've got to beat St. Louis to even stay relevant here. The Dallas game, it's going to be hard. Dallas is potentially a Stanley Cup favorite at this point, or at least one of the favorites. And then they come home. I mean, they're going to sell a lot of tickets. You got Carolina, Boston, New York, and Toronto. This seems like too much of a tough stretch. Just real quick, Zach, when it comes to the Ducks and the rest of March here, what are we looking for? I mean, if you're wanting the Ducks to continue on this trend of maybe pushing towards the playoff, what are you looking for out of the Ducks these next 2 weeks?
Well, so here's the thing. Like, when it comes to them playing against top teams, they're 2-0 against Dallas this year. They've beaten Edmonton 2 or 3 times. They've beaten Carolina once. And it's very not out of the question that they could win some of those games. And the problem, it's not really a problem. These games that they've lost and that they've not made up ground in the wild card when, the Vancouver and Calgary aren't exactly blowing the doors off anybody. They could have made up some of this ground. They're just losing these tight games. And I think that sort of points to where the Ducks are right now, that the fact that they are still sort of in the mix is a positive. The fact that these games are meaningful is exactly what the management said that they wanted at this point in the year. The games have been competitive. The games have been close, but clearly the Ducks are just a notch below. So when it comes to staying with the pack, I mean, yes, you have to beat Nashville. Like that's not a question. Nashville is a disaster this year in terms of what they should be. Then you have to win that game in St. Louis next Sunday. And that's, like, when it comes to, I thought last night was kind of a make or break thing where, like, if the Ducks had won, you could still legitimately say, okay, there's a shot here. But even still, had they won, there's 17 games left. Vancouver and Calgary are playing at a 91-point pace. For the Ducks to get to that point, they'd have to go 14-3 down the stretch. And that's, especially with the games that are coming up. And yes, they do play Calgary twice, and they play Vancouver in there too. It's still a Herculean task to be able to do it. So I think what you're looking for at this point is just the response. Can they continue to fight? Can they continue to be competitive? Because the playoffs aren't happening. And I think the team would have even said that making the playoffs is sort of ahead of schedule. So you just want them to compete. And I thought that it took them a little while last night to get their engine going because they came into Utah at 3 a.m. But it was a close game in the third period. And even the Washington game the night before, that Washington is the best team in the league record-wise. And they kept coming back and coming back and coming back until a couple turnovers in the final 6 minutes, and it's a 7-4 game. But they went toe-to-toe with the best team in the league. So I think there's nothing but positives. It's just the Ducks fan base has certainly got their hopes up because of how close it got there for a minute. But I think as long as they keep competing like they have, I don't think there's anything to hang their heads about into this final stretch.
I think I was talking to you about this, and I just want to welcome Thomas Murray to Wings on Katella podcast. Thomas, hey, buddy. You're muted, pal.
There you go. How's it going?
Good, buddy. Zach, I don't know if it was you or Thomas I was talking to before the season started, but my goal for the Ducks, like the way I viewed the Anaheim Ducks was finish at 500. Finish right at 500, 82 points on the season. Right now sitting at 63 points. So you got to make up 19 points in, let's see that, 10 plus 7, 17 games.
17 games, yep.
So 19 points in 17 games is what I'm looking for from the Anaheim Ducks. Obviously,
they're 2 games under now, I think.
I believe so.
Yeah.
I believe so. So that's where I want to see the Ducks, is just pick up those extra 2 games. That's it. Thomas, we're talking Anaheim Ducks here. I want to touch on the trade deadline really quick. Brian Dumoulin trade. Obviously, Brian Dumoulin very well liked with this Ducks team. It sounds like he may even have interest in coming back over the summer. But they did receive Herman Traff or Troff?
There's an umlaut over the A, so I think it's Traff.
There it is.
Yeah.
There it is. So Herman Traff. I'll take it. I'll give it to either of you guys. What can you tell me about Herman and also the Brian Dumoulin trade? Zach, I know you mentioned Dumoulin's presence in the locker room, and Thomas, I know you've seen it as well.
Yeah. As veteran guy, it's been around the team for a while, right? So usually when just those kinds of things happen, like it's some sort of like, it's bittersweet, right? I think that's the best way to put it. But I mean, they get a younger player kind of develop, right? Move forward with. And I mean, it's expected in sports, those kinds of things that happen. And it's part of, a young team growing to get better.
Yeah, when it comes to the trade, I mean, the Ducks got Dumoulin for a 4th-round pick. They traded him and received a 19-year-old prospect who was a 3rd-rounder and a 2nd-round pick. That's a good bit of business for Pat Verbeek there. Traff is, from the scouting reports I've been able to see, and just he played for Sweden at the World Juniors. He scored 2 goals, I think, at World Juniors. He's 19 years old, and he's huge. He's like 6'3", 200-something as a 19-year-old kid. Big body, good hands. That's what Verbeek was saying. And I think that's something that I think when you watch the Ducks play Washington, you kind of see that that's something that they still need. Like, they have some skill for sure, but like Washington's top 6 is humongous. They're beasts up front. I think the stat that I had was of the top 6 of Washington's forwards, 5 of them are 6'3" or taller, and 4 of them are 220 or heavier. And on the Ducks' entire roster that they fielded that night, they had 1 player or 2 players over 6'3" and 1 player over 220, and that's Ross Johnston, who isn't exactly lighting up the world. So I think that's a good piece to have in the system. Whether he actually comes up with the Ducks at some point, who's to tell with some of these European prospects. Yeah. And with Dumoulin, I think Verbeek said it himself, like, he's a good guy that they had in the room for all these young kids to learn from. I think, and the fact that he wanted to come back, I think is great, but I don't think that there's a spot for him to come back into when it comes into next year, because you moved him to open up the space for Minchikov and Zellweger to play. Great. You go into next year, and now you're going to have Tristan Luneau coming up from San Diego that'll slot in on the right side, and there's just not, assuming you're keeping all the veterans like Trouba and Gudas, there's no spot for him to go. So as much as he was great to have him in the room, apparently well liked as team DJ, there's just not a spot for him on the team. And he's a guy that at this point in his career, he still has a lot to give as like a steady, reliable stay-at-home defenseman. So for him to go to New Jersey, who's now just ravaged by injuries, which is unfortunate for them, but I think he can find a spot with a competing team. I think he proved himself this year as like a good piece to have. So I think if you're a young team that needs somebody to learn from, there's a guy. If you're a cup contending team and you need a reliable back end presence, he's available to go to teams like that in the offseason, but not Anaheim, I don't think.
I remember him when he was with Pittsburgh. He had a lot of upside when he was starting his career. Big upside defenseman. You mentioned Team DJ. Jack, was the day Dumoulin traded the day that you came out with the Angels DJ article?
I don't know.
I think it was.
It was
While
the day
I look this up, I will.
right around it, yeah.
Yeah, pull that up when we get a chance.
Yeah.
just looking at Herman Traff, this year 25 games, 29 penalty minutes, 7 points, 3 goals, 4 assists.
In the
91st
Swedish
overall
league, right?
Swedish league with a HV 71. 91st overall pick from last year. Just anytime you have a high pick, it's not like the NFL draft. It's not like the MLB draft. It's very interesting. Hockey is a very interesting development process, and I love it. We're going to get into another high-end pick. Did you find out, Jack? Is it the same day?
It was 3 days before.
3 days
So,
before.
yeah.
Love
But
it.
also, like, I just wanted to put an emphasis on this. The most important part of this deal wasn't the return. It's opening the spots for the 3 left defensemen because Jackson Lacombe, Pavel Mintyukov, Owen Zellweger, it's more important for them to be playing every night than it is to have a veteran defenseman to show them the ropes. Like, all 3 of those guys have been up here for, this is now their, second season? Full season, I think?
Yep.
Could be wrong. Well, Zellweger came up the second half of last year, but they just need to play every night. And it was holding them down, having Dumoulin in the lineup instead of Zellweger or Mintyukov.
You broke into my next argument, man. I had layers. See, there's layers to the structure of telling the story in the podcast form. So, Jack, take over, man. I don't care. No, I actually wasn't going to go with that. I was actually going to ask about Olivier Killington, but we'll go into this. Freeing up the spots so that you don't have to worry about who your 7th defenseman is at this point, which it probably is Olivier at this point. But
It's Oliver Shillington, by the way.
There you go. 2nd-round pick from I saw this kid play for 8 years with Stockton, essentially. Even though I know they haven't played in Stockton since like COVID, but still, I feel like I watched that kid grow up in Stockton. I'm assuming he is the 7th defenseman at this point. But what these trades did was freed up the spots for Lacombe, and in particular, Pavel Mintyukov, Owen Zellweger, and the importance of having those guys out there. I think Mintyukov broke camp 2 years ago. He started from game 1 last year. But Owen Zellweger, I'm sharing personal opinion, which I've gotten in a lot of trouble for doing this lately. But Owen Zellweger, to me, is so far above whatever his stat line will ever be. I think he is so dramatically important on the ice. His ability to move the puck in and out of the zone. Also, he makes a lot of defensive blunders, but I can't imagine a kid's 21 years old.
21.
Yeah, and that's gonna happen. I said the same thing about Mintyukov with a buddy of mine, Jason Hernandez, who used to do this kind of stuff. But Zach, Thomas, anything that you have to add to what Jack was saying when it comes to freeing up the playing time for Zellweger and Mintyukov?
Yeah, of course, the defenseman line, like, it was crowded all year. I mean, whether it was Zellweger or if it was Mintyukov, they were both missing extended time, an extended amount of games as healthy scratches for no reason. Essentially no reason. Obviously, with Dumoulin there, you want to keep him in. But, I mean, hey, I'm all about, like, development, letting the younger guys play, getting your core together and letting them gel. And I think that's just kind of the opportunity you have, especially, with Mintyukov and Zellweger. You bring it up, Taylor, his stat line, it's not the best. But, I mean, the thing that I've always noticed with him is I've always thought he's a pretty good skater out there, and I feel like he does a good job of just holding the puck and passing it and, creating assists and opportunities.
Absolutely. I agree with you. It's not that he's going to have this bad stat line or that he's a bad offensive player by any means. It's just he's the kind of player that doesn't show up in the box score that makes the dramatic importance of the game. And that's what I saw from him. And you mentioned it, his skating ability is off the charts. You look at that Team Canada World Juniors roster, I think did they win that year when Zellweger was up there?
Yes.
With Bedard, Connor Bedard.
Yeah.
I actually was more impressed with Owen Zellweger than I was Connor Bedard, which, Connor Bedard is obviously very special and everything, but I was very impressed with Zellweger. Zach, anything more to add on that?
Yeah, so Zellweger, the point of opening up the spot, because here's what the real problem was when they had all these guys. When you have young defensemen, like Jackson Lacombe's a perfect example. You have a young defenseman, they need to play through the mistakes. The problem was when there was only the one spot, anytime either of them made a mistake, it was like, oh, well, I guess they're going to sit the next game. And so they didn't have the ability to rectify their mistakes or learn from it and try again the next night. So you have like Mintyukov was the real victim of that midway through the season, because they were really trying to lock in on his off puck defending, because he would kind of lose guys behind him. And there was a very specific moment in the last time they played in Utah back in December where that happened. He came out and didn't play for like 8 games, and there was never a chance for him to make up for that mistake, despite the coaches, when we would ask them, saying like, yeah, no, he really wants to get in, and no, they're not doing anything wrong. There's just not enough spots, and it's healthy and competitive. All that's fine. And I think that there is something to that. But I look at Olin Zellweger just the last 2 games against Washington. He's 5'7", right? In 190 pounds. And he is going up against this humongous Capitals team. And he is a workout fanatic. Like, I remember talking to Cam Fowler back in November just about, hey, you're paired up with him. What's it like being paired up with this kid? And he's like, he works out more than I ever did at his age. And he is just built with muscle. And he's a rink rat. Zellweger is always on the ice whenever he gets the shot. And that you see that made up in a game like that where he's playing these huge guys. There was one shift that I posted on Twitter where he went up against Pierre-Luc Dubois, who was, I think, 6'3" and 200 pounds himself. And Zellweger disrupted his rush into the zone and then tied up with him in front of the net, pushed him out, and eventually forced the turnover to get out of the zone. That's great. And that's the positive you see. And then you go to Utah last night, and I think it was the second Utah goal. There was a turnover on the boards. Zellweger skating full bore towards the puck battle, and he just overskated it. And then the puck gets in behind him, and it's immediately a goal. So that's the thing where, like, okay, that's a teachable moment that you can now move forward with. So there's the good and the bad every single night. So you look at a guy like Jackson Lacombe, who's now 24, he had a lot of those ups and downs. And now you go into year 2, and he's the best defenseman on the team all of a sudden.
Undeniably.
It's incredible. Yeah. So I think you just need opening up the playing time, letting them go through the ups and downs. Zellweger can make up for it with his speed and skill. And there's no way for him to replicate going up against NHL players in practice than there is to do it in a game. So Oliver Shillington is going to sit on the bench unless there's an injury until the rest of the year. And if he plays, that's either just throwing him a bone or there's an issue that needs to be addressed. But
makes sense. I apologize. I know I got the snowplow, and I think it's going to be popping back in and out, so I might mute myself. But the thing I like about both of these guys is they stay out of the box. As I look at it, I think I was just looking at it. They're averaging a minor penalty every 5 games they play, 5 or 6 games they play. That's really important, especially for defensemen that not only are learning, young defensemen, because they're the ones that are making the mistakes, and penalties tend to be mistakes, but I just like that they stay out of the box and they don't have to utilize a 5-man defense system on a power play. That's very important to do. So I really like that these are 2 defensemen stay out of the box. I want to move on just because I've got to get out of here. That's the only thing. So I just want to move on to Angels real quick, guys, and then I'm gonna hand this whole thing over back to Thomas, and you guys are gonna run it out of here to close. But Jack, I want to touch on 2 things. Right now we're talking position battles, big time position battles for opening day, and I've always said your roster on opening day does not really matter compared to your roster in July or August or September in particular, but you mentioned a guy, you wrote about a guy that I thought had at least a decent chance of at least getting a longer look at the opening day roster, Sean Anderson. Really interesting case. Now, the baseball right now is working on this kick changeup. It's a new style changeup, is essentially, and it's coming from Tread Athletics. But you talked to Sean about this. Tell me a little bit about Sean Anderson and this kick changeup that you've got going on.
Yeah, so the kick changeup obviously taking the world by storm, or baseball world by storm this spring, but he's been throwing it since 2019. And he was tweaking with it. It was really nasty when he threw it right, but he couldn't find consistency. He went to Tread Athletics in 2022. They continued to tinker with it, and that's when Tread learned of it, and they started teaching other guys how to do it, and it's kind of developed into this big thing. But for Sean Anderson specifically, he was still tinkering with it, couldn't find the consistency, and he's a supinator, which for those that don't know, that just means, do I have a ball here? I do not have a ball. So when you throw a pitch, if your fingers are kind of more on the outside, that means you're a supinator. So, it's good for like sliders and breaking balls and stuff like that, but not very good for changeups, which you have to kind of pronate, which goes the other way. So because he was a supinator, he decided. So first of all, how you grip the pitch is a typical changeup. You have your middle and ring finger on the two seams right here, and you pronate. What he did was shift it over, had his index finger and his ring finger on the ball with his middle finger on top, with just the fingertip on top, and he pushed down the ball to create a different type of spin and make it go the other way. Now he throws like a splitter grip, so he has a split grip, but he also keeps his ring finger right next to his middle finger, which is very odd. Haven't seen that before. And he kicks the ball with his middle finger still, so it gets that same spin. And it just has more consistency for him since he's a supinator and he comes across the ball a little bit. And it's developed into a pretty decent pitch, and he had a decent spring until he got sent down the other day.
I agree, and as soon as I hit the mic, I knew he was going to drive right past right here. That's the plow. He's going to be here for a second. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, this is a form of it's a variation between a forkball and a Vulcan changeup, right? Those are the two because a Vulcan is you're splitting it right here, and I believe a fork is just a dead spin middle finger splitter. It's essentially an even more kill spin splitter. God, that's a fun one. There you go. How much wood would a woodchuck chuck? I don't know, Jack. Anything that you could tell me about that? Do you agree that it's a variation, or do we know?
I don't know, and just from what I've gotten from talking to him and talking to Ron Washington, it sounds like he's just a tinkerer who's always messing with his pitches and trying to find the perfect stuff. So, I mean, who knows if this pitch grip even sticks long term. So I think he's just always just messing around with it, trying to find what's best.
Okay, sounds good. Talking about position battles, I'm going to leave this for Thomas a little bit as well because I know you guys talked about it on the side here. One guy that I want to mention is a guy that I really like. I really like this guy as a human being, but the last 2 years, I'm looking at ERAs of 8.29 and 6.02. I think it's time that Jose Suarez finally gets off of the 40-man roster. I really just don't see a spot for him. It's been a bad spring. It was a bad 2024. It was a bad 2023. You're banking on, he had 2 good years. Undeniably, he had 2 good years, 21-22, where he threw essentially 200 innings and had a sub-4 ERA. I want to say it was like a 110 ERA plus, but last 2 years, 63 ERA plus, a 5.63 FIP, 1.7 WHIP, and a 6.91 ERA. I just don't see a spot for Jose Suarez anymore on this Angels roster. And I think statistically, it's supported. I know that people are up in arms about it, and you can't be up in arms. It's a business, right? It's a business. I understand there's emotion attached to this fan base, attached to this team, but realistically, unemotionally, like you and me, he's just been bad. He's just been so bad. You can't roster this guy, especially when you're making comments about trying to compete. So I think the Angels have 5 to 6 bullpen spots, relief spots right now. I believe there are still. I was looking at it. I think there's 12 unclaimed pitchers in camp at this point to a degree. Between the guys that aren't promised a job, which I think there's only 6 of them. Would you agree, Jack, that maybe it's time for Jose Suarez to be sitting on the DFA charts or maybe down in Salt Lake to some degree?
It's tough because just to kind of push back on what you said about the spring, I know obviously spring training stats don't really hold much weight, but in his previous outings, he was throwing the ball pretty well until that ugly game against Texas this week. I know Washington and Perry Manassian think not necessarily highly, but they think they still have something in him that can make him a quality major league pitcher. It's tough. I don't know, and it's also tough because, like you said, he had that success early on in his career. There's not many guys that are successful as 21, 22-year-old major leaguers and then just lose it and can't do anything after that. So I still think there's still something in there with him. I don't know if he needs to change the scenery or what. He, like I said, until this week, he was throwing the ball pretty well in spring. I think he can carve out a role in the bullpen and be a decent major league pitcher, but that's just me.
That's absolutely fine. I like the counter argument. I mean, I know the organization really likes him. They really do, and they want to find value in him. I think for me, and I'm pulling this up right now, just looking at percentages. He does use his four-seamer 40% of the time, and that's what I was worried he was using a sinker. It says he uses a sinker about 9% of the time here, or at least last year. This guy's 5'9". I mean, I don't know what he's listed at, but he's 5'8", 5'9". He's not really much of an athlete. Without having that downhill plane, that natural body downhill plane, you've got to be utilizing your four seam. You got to be utilizing it up in the zone. He's got enough spin. He's got enough raw data with the fastball, enough velocity to make it work in the zone. I don't know if it's a theory change of get this guy working four seam, a north south instead of east west. Maybe a little less south, with the fastball. I don't know. One guy I do want to touch on, and then I'm gonna have to take off, so I'm gonna let you guys take over this. Jack, did we talk about Ryan Johnson last week? George Clinton?
A little bit, yeah.
This guy is so funky, man. George Clinton, love him. His name is Ryan Johnson. If you're unfamiliar with him, this is a guy that was selected at the end of the second round last year, the compensation round, Comp B. That was a selection that was granted because Shohei Ohtani didn't sign. But if you're unfamiliar, holds the Dallas Baptist record for wins, strikeouts, multiple items. I'm trying to remember where I ranked him with Baseball America this last year. I want to say 7, I think is what I had him at. I think it was Josh Beluga, then Ryan Johnson. So either way, top 10 prospect in the organization, not just by Baseball America, but by others as well. I think kid has not thrown a minor league pitch. They shut him down after the draft last year. He's super funky. He's got 2 pitches at minimum right now that I think could play at the major league level. It's whether he can throw strikes with it. Jack, what's your thought here? Ryan Johnson. Do you think he could be one of those 6 guys that cracks the bullpen here?
At the end of the day, I don't think so. But he has thrown the ball well this spring. He's impressed a lot of people here at spring training, and he's been commanding the zone. I mean, look at his college stats. Last year was 158 strikeouts or 156 strikeouts and only like 14 walks.
Yep,
it's a 10-something strike to walk ratio. That's insane. And he's been doing he doesn't have the 10 strikeout to walk ratio in spring, but he's not walking guys. He's filling up the zone. He's getting outs. I don't think he's given up a run this spring yet. But I don't see them throwing him straight to the majors. I think he's going to go, I don't know where, but I think he's going to be probably, I guess, AA. That's my guess. But he's definitely going to go to the minors is my guess. I can't see them putting him in the majors right away.
When they drafted him, they said they were going to try and work him as a starter. I imagine if that's still the plan, he's going to have to go to the minors. If that's 100%. The plan, if you're trying to tap into his starter upside, it has to be in the minors. You can't have him as your 5th starter. Thomas, Zach, I know you guys are going to talk about the 5th position. I'm just going to give my brief thoughts. The 5th starter position or battle, like I said, 5 to 6 relief spots. For me, it's pretty simple. Luis Rengifo, if he's healthy, he gets one of the middle infield spots. Kevin Newman gets the other. Then you're trying to figure out who the bench guy is for the middle infield. Do you also bring in a utility type that's a right-handed hitter? Maybe someone that could work with Nolan Schanuel at first base, like J.D. Davis. Maybe Tim Anderson gets time in the outfield. Just little things like that. That's what's on my mind. I'm sure you guys are going to talk plenty about it, so enjoy. One last side note that I want to run with before I take off. Riley Bauman did retire. Zach, I see you laughing. Riley Bauman.
You said you were going to leave for like 20 minutes.
I've been leaving, man. That's how I go. I'm still here.
I know.
Angels' 13th round pick from 2023, Riley Bauman out of Abilene Christian. He did retire this week. Great kid. Someone that the organization actually recommended as a top 30 prospect. I don't know why he retired. I'll reach out to him at some point. But great kid. Best wishes beyond pro ball, Riley. And to the boys, enjoy, guys. I'm going to go take off for the weekend, go dig some snow. So we'll see you later.
Have fun with the snow. All right, I'll be taking over for Taylor. Jack, let's talk about the rotation right now. And Zach, I mean, if you want to come in, I know you've been busy with Ducks and everything, so I'm not sure how much you've been paying attention too much to the Angels like rotation. But I mean, the rotation right now, Jack, it's coming down to two guys between Dana and Kochanowicz. I'm curious, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah,
Or sorry, Detmers, my bad.
I knew who you meant. I knew who you meant. Originally, it was Detmers, Kochanowicz, and Silseth, but Silseth hasn't had the best spring. I don't think he's going to get that fifth starter, so I agree. It's definitely a race between Detmers and Kochanowicz. It's tough because Detmers obviously has much higher upside because he's shown flashes of his potential of what he can do in the major league level, but obviously he's had 2 rough years. Last year was just a train wreck for him. Kochanowicz, he came up and he made 11 starts last year. His first 2 starts weren't that good. He got sent down to the minors, came back up, and in the 9 starts to finish out the year, he had a 2.78 ERA. And the whole year he had a 3.8 walk percentage, which is really good, a 56.5% ground ball rate, which is really good. So he fills up the zone. He uses his power sinker to get ground balls and get outs. It's going to be tough to give it away or to take it away from him, but I don't know. I feel like Detmers is going to get the fifth spot just because of his upside, and he's thrown the ball well this spring as well. But Kochanowicz, I don't know. I could see him definitely going down to the minors and working as a starter there. I also wouldn't be shocked if the Angels maybe put him in the bullpen and have him be the long relief guy. That way he's still getting innings in the major league level, and he's not just a 1-inning guy. He can go get 2, 3, maybe even 4 innings of work.
Yeah, I agree, kind of in a reverse way, actually. I mean, I think both of them are good pitchers, and I think they both can pitch at the major league level. And I would hate to see the Angels kind of lose out on Detmers, because if they decide to send him down, he's gonna get DFA'd, and he's likely to get claimed at the end of the day. I think what I would like to see out of them is, because I know they're pretty high on Detmer still, is maybe you put him in the bullpen, and that way you're able to keep him, and when the time is right, you put him back in the rotation and make him a long inning guy. And also, just I feel like just working, you still have the opportunity to work alongside him, still kind of work out whatever kinks, and keep his confidence too. Just keeping him around, keeping him in the clubhouse. I remember last year when he came back from his long stint in the minors, you could tell he was a little frustrated by that, and I mean I get it, but I mean it hasn't been consistent enough. He's shown some flashes still in spring training this year where he's looked pretty promising again, but he's also just had some moments too where it's like, come on. And I think with Kochanowicz he's just been so consistent and he's been so good, and I think like just thinking of going forward in the season, he's the right man for the fifth man in the rotation.
Yeah, the biggest thing with Detmers is his fastball command. I mean, I can't pull it up on my phone without it looking all funky, but if you look at Baseball Savant, you can go to like the pitch maps. You can sort it by, I think it's swing and misses. You can sort it by hits. You can sort it by a whole bunch of stuff. When it's swing and misses, it's all right at the top of the zone. When it's hits, it's all at the middle of the zone. And when you look at his all pitches, all fastballs that he threw last year, the bright red, which signals where he threw most of his pitches, was in the middle of the zone. So you throw a fastball down the middle in the major leagues, 9 times out of 10, that's going to get pummeled. So the biggest thing with him is just command. If he can command his fastball, he's going to be a good pitcher. I think you just muted yourself.
Yeah, I agree. He has he's again shown a lot of promise. Has that no-hitter on his resume. I know we shouldn't hold on to that forever, but he's shown it at times where he can be a dominant pitcher, and he could be a mid-rotation kind of guy, maybe even top of the rotation if everything can just go be put together correctly. And yeah, you bring up a good point. I'm looking at it right now on Baseball Savant. Pretty much everything, his fastball, especially like mid to high, all strikes, and then yeah, on that lower side, like gets hit a lot. Let's kind of change the subject over to the middle infield.
Well, one
sorry.
other thing.
Go for it.
Jack, does it matter? Jack, do you think it matters lefty or righty to have that in the mix between Detmers and Conowitz? Like in terms of just having the makeup of the 5-man?
Considering they already have Tyler Anderson and let's see who else is in the rotation. Tyler Anderson, Jose Soriano, Kyle Hendricks. Why am I trying to blank on the fourth starter?
Kikuchi.
Oh, Kikuchi, yeah.
He's got a banner outside the stadium, man. You can't forget his name now.
I know. He's got the new banner. But I don't think it's going to make that much of a difference considering they already have one. I think at the end of the day, they want the best pitcher available. I think that's more important than matchups and all that. Because if you which we'll get into in a second, the bullpen, there's a lot of lefty candidates up there. So if they only have one lefty starter, they're going to have plenty of lefties in the bullpen that can kind of clean up the mess.
Yeah, and again, I think just consistency in that rotation. Last year you had 2 lefties I believe Canning's a lefty, but Sandoval is, and it's just hasn't worked out over the years. So, I think you're just looking for the best man available.
Yeah, and when it goes, I mean, like you said, like Jack said earlier, spring numbers don't mean a whole lot, and they're not exactly a whole decently far apart, either Detmers or Konowitz. But Konowitz is a little bit better on the numbers, at least in spring. But I think the problem that, as you've alluded to too, the Angels have just kind of sunk too much time into Reed Detmers to let him walk away like that. And I think if it were me, I think I'd go Detmers still, just because I think you have to. But if you want to make the hard business cut and let him go, see if he excels in another pasture, then you'd make it. But I think they have to, for the sake of the investment made, just stick with Detmers, at least to start.
Yeah, no, then that's completely like a valid point. I wouldn't argue against that. Cool. Now let's touch up on that middle infield. So Jack, right now, I mean, obviously Rengifo hasn't played a lot, but what do you think that's looking like come opening day?
Yeah, it's a little tough with Rengifo just because he's only played in one spring training game. He's played in 2 minor league games where he's only been a DH, and when he gets a hit, he gets pulled for a pinch runner, so he hasn't even ran the bases yet. He just started infield activity like fielding ground balls and stuff this past week. The Angels don't seem overly concerned that he's going to be on the IL or anything like that. They think he's going to be fine. They're just taking it really slow and being really cautious with him to make sure they get it right. But, he's had, 7 at-bats this spring, and Ron Washington said they'd like to get him 40 at-bats before he gets to a major league game, so he's going to have a lot of work to do in the next couple weeks. But in a world where Rengifo isn't available on opening day, Zach Neto's also not going to be available opening day because he's recovering from shoulder surgery. So I think when you look at the middle infield depth that's still on the roster right now, I think Kevin Newman's the best option for starting shortstop just because he's been there, done that with the Diamondbacks last year. He was really good defensively last year. Off the top of my head, I believe he was +4 outs above average at shortstop last year with a barely below average bat, which when you provide that level of defense, that's fine. The Angels have other areas in the lineup where they can provide some offense. So I think he's going to be your opening day shortstop is my guess. Second base without Rengifo, that gets a little more questionable because the guys they brought in haven't been overly good. Scott Kingery struggled at the plate, but he's played really good defense wherever they put him. They put him in the outfield, they put him at second, and he's played well there, so he might have a shot. Kyron Paris is on fire at the plate this spring. He changed his swing. He visited Judge's hitting coach, which we talked about last week in the pod. He's hitting 364 with the 1200 OPS. He's definitely a candidate, and he's got options. So whenever Rinkifo's ready, they could option him back down to whatever level they want to send him to. So he's definitely in the mix. Tim Anderson, non-roster invite. He got a slow start to the spring, and again, like I said, spring numbers don't mean too much, but he started out slow to the spring. But in the month of March in spring training, if I can read my notes, he's 7 for 20, which is a 350 batting average. Nothing to scoff at, and he's played solid, not stellar, but solid defense. He, he's a veteran. He's been in the league for a while. I know the last couple of years have been pretty rough for him, but he's an option until Rinkivo comes back. There's another guy, David Mershon. I don't see him fitting in the lineup. He's only 3 for 14 in his limited amount of time in spring training. And the last guy is Christian Moore, best prospect in the Angels system. He's doing okay at the plate. He's hitting 273, but with only one extra base hit. So you'd like to see more extra base hits out of him. Not necessarily home runs, but just more gap-to-gap power, getting doubles. He's got legs. He can leg out a triple if needed. He hasn't looked overmatched this spring, but you can definitely tell he's not ready yet, which is totally fine. He got drafted last year. Yeah, I know the Angels like to rush all their prospects up the year after, but if he's not ready and he needs to go to the minor leagues to start the year, that is totally fine. So I think ultimately it comes down to Kevin Newman and Kyron Paris are the two favorites for me, maybe Tim Anderson. I don't know what you guys think. I don't know, I just rattled on for like ever.
I mean, what I'm hearing is there's not like no option is going to be like rock solid in terms of like this is the guy that we want to hold on to long term. Like it's all, I think because like you said that it's sort of they're both either whoever it is placeholders for Neto and Rengifo when they're both healthy. Give the kids a shot. Like if Paris is having a hot spring, let him go. See if he can handle a major league load. Like I think that's if you know that they're going to get replaced, just see what you got and not worry too much about like who's the best player right this second. I think it's see what you got. If just considering where the Angels are in the long term, I think that would be my outlook on it is give the kids a shot, see what you have.
And something I will say, you at the beginning you kind of said if none of us were really doing too hot. I mean, this at the end of the day, this is all depth. None of these guys in a perfect world are starters. So you just need to be them. You just need them to be serviceable for the Angels. And which I will say, the last few years it's been tough for the Angels to find depth that's been serviceable. I think this year they've had the most serviceable depth that they've had in a while, which I think is a good thing and a good improvement for this team.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, the depth is beyond the sky limits right now. I mean, it's higher than it's ever been, especially last season. It got really ugly around September time, and a lot of the trash pandas were on the roster at that point. I agree. I kind of agree with Zach, though. I think Kyron Paris has just been really good this spring, and spring numbers don't matter, but he looks like a different player out there, and he's just standing out so much where you just kind of look at him and you're like, okay, he's a little bit different now. The adjustments that he made at the plate, they've been paying off for him, and he's earned it. He deserves to be on the roster. He's done everything right. He's been going about his game the right way and doing his thing, and I mean, I would definitely give it to him, especially if just that streakiness carries over into the start of the season at the end of the month, and you might be able to roll with that and play him alongside Neto when he gets back, and then I think at shortstop I would probably give it to Anderson just because he has been playing a little bit better lately. That's just to say today. It's only March 13th, and so things can kind of change for Tim Anderson at the end of the spring. But he looks like he's starting to kind of find himself at the plate. And worst case, you roll with him for 3-4 weeks into the season, and if it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out. It's kind of the move you make when you sign a veteran like that to a minor league deal who's on the cusp of making the roster. So I mean, I think I would go with those two, but I do like what you said about Kingery's defense. That could be valuable in itself, and just have him at the bottom of the lineup.
And One thing about Paris too, a little caveat to his spring training numbers is he hasn't started a ton of games, so the bulk of his damage is coming in the second half of the games when all the major league talent's already out of the game. So that is a caveat to, obviously the numbers are great, the swing looks good, he looks confident, but that is something to keep in mind.
Hitting the ball off a bunch of number 76s on the mound.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, sure.
Perfect. Is there anything else that you guys want to touch on Angels-wise?
Well, I think the biggest news in Angel Land right now is who's getting on the front of the building. They got the Mike Trout mural up, right? Mike Trout, Kikuchi, then I think it was Neto and Ohapi, right?
I know Hoppy's there. I don't think Neto is, but I would assume.
Well, Neto has the street lights. He's on the street light banners.
Oh, okay.
So is there two banners left or something like that?
Yeah. Oh, and Kenley Jansen's getting is also on the street lights.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I think he's on the street lights. I think I've seen that.
Is Kenley Jansen a front of the building type?
I'm gonna go with no, just because depending how the Angels are come July, he could be traded.
Yeah, I think they put Kikuchi in the Rendon spot, so I don't know if that's good omen or bad omen.
Only one way to find out.
Yeah. You guys have been on for almost an hour now, so before we head out, I do want to just touch on one thing with Zach. We talked about it yesterday. Zach, one thing you guys didn't really talk too much about was, should the Ducks, I'm kind of just curious on the Ducks, what do you think about their trade deadline approach? Do you think they should have been bigger buyers or bigger sellers?
I think they did exactly what they could do. I think it's different than last year where they had guys to sell. Where this year, the only two guys that were even, there's always the rumors of John Gibson, the rumors of Trevor Zegras. I don't think those were ever been truly founded in anything other than people see John Gibson he's a really good goaltender on a bad team. We should free him and send him to Edmonton. The punishment that is. But Brian Dumoulin was really the only asset they could trade. Robbie Fabry was the other guy, but he's injured and hasn't really had a great season to pawn him off to anybody. And I've seen him a couple times in the last week. He's got a broken bone in his hand, and it doesn't look like it's healing anytime soon. So nobody would have taken that on. So in terms of guys to sell, I think Dumoulin was the only guy. In terms of buying, so I had talked about this with some of the guys from the Hockey News that with Dumoulin's expressed intent or expressed desire to try and stay, to work something out with his agent, I thought that might have opened up the possibility of saying, okay, if we're going to bring back Brian Dumoulin, then that all of a sudden makes either Pavel Mintyukov or Olen Zellweger expendable, and maybe you include one of those guys in a trade for it. It's reported by the Canadian insiders that the Ducks were in on Mikko Rantanen, one of the 8 teams that were talking to the Hurricanes about trading for Mikko Rantanen, who ended up in Dallas earlier in Colorado this year. So I think that would have been interesting, but it just didn't seem like the deadline for the Ducks to do any major business. The main thing this team still needs, and Verbeek said it when I asked him on deadline day, they still need scoring, and they still need a big-time scorer, and that will certainly be their main focus come July 1st for free agency. And if they take their swings and miss on the free agents like they did last year, then they'll have to go to the trade market, because it's so very clear that that's what this team needs. And they do have a surplus of defensemen. So I think when it comes to buying, you want a big scorer, and some of those big scorers just weren't as readily available at the deadline as they might be in the summer. So they did what they needed to do.
Yeah, I
did what they could do, really. There just wasn't a whole lot to do.
Yeah, no, I think they went about it the right way. I think it's important to keep a guy like Gibson or Zegras, especially Zegras, just for the chemistry that he brings to the locker room, to the line.
There's so much better when he's on the ice.
Yeah,
it's crazy to the people that are saying for him to be traded just don't watch enough Ducks games to know what he does for this team.
Yeah,
that's all it is.
Yeah, it's like what you just said about the Angels: bad omen, good omen. There's a lot of good omen when he's on the ice, and he brings that to a team that struggles to score.
Absolutely.
Before we let you guys go, is there anything else that you want to talk about, Angels or Ducks wise?
No. Say goodbye
I will
to.
say good nugget.
Good
Athletic just said the Ducks have the second best goalie tandem in the NHL.
That's right.
Today. They said that today. So I think that I'm not going to say that played a factor into them not trading away John Gibson at the deadline, but I think it's pretty clear that if this team wants to win, the best chance for them to make the playoffs this year is to have those two be the goaltenders moving forward and not just have Lukas Dostal be your only goalie.
Yeah. And I think that's true even going into next year. The goalie depth in the organization just isn't what it has been historically. So if you can have these two guys playing at the level they are, and even I've said it, like, you look at where they are in the standings, and I've talked to some other people online recently, like, if this team, if their power play and penalty kill they don't need to be the top of the league, but if they were just average, they weren't as terrible as they are, they might just be in a playoff spot, honestly.
Well, they're like, they played better the last month or so, but over the whole season, they are still one of the worst 5-on-5 teams in the NHL too. Like, if they had league average goaltending, they would be at the bottom of the standings probably.
Sure. And I do want to dive into the numbers for a story here at some point, just based on the difference in the last 2 months or even since Christmas overall versus the whole season. But yeah, this is a team that it's grown over the course of the year. Like, it's so clear to see on the ice, and the coaches will tell you that the numbers don't bear it out, and I think that's probably true. But if I pulled up a game from October and compared to just watching the game, it would look different. It's just so completely different, and there's plenty of positives to have. And without the goaltending, I don't know if they have the ability to be patient like that and find their way through. If the goaltending was bad, I think they probably would have blown the thing up.
Yeah.
Just because you got to do something.
And just how bad they have been at 5-on-5. If you look at evolving hockey in the analytical era, which goes back to 2007, 2008, this year's Ducks have given up the most expected goals against per 60 minutes, the sixth most expected goals against per 60 minutes in the analytical era. So the fact that they're fighting for a playoff spot right now is pretty remarkable. And by the way, number one on that list is the 2022-2023 Anaheim Ducks.
Yeah, they've been not great the last 2 or 3 years in particular. It's kind of staggering just how bad they ended up being, but they were 2 years, 3 years too late on starting the rebuild. So it's kind of to even see the talent that is in the system now. There's still a bright future ahead. It just
100%.
Just not right now.
Yeah, the rebuild truly didn't start until Pat Verbeek took over.
Yeah.
So you could argue that the rebuild's only 3 years old now, 4 years old. Wait, how long is he? Is that 22? They took over.
Yeah, he's been here 2.5 years.
You could argue that the Ducks rebuild started 2.5 years ago, as opposed to the 7 straight seasons they missed the playoffs, because Bob Murray didn't have any intentions in rebuilding.
Correct. Yeah. I'm trying to quickly navigate natural stat trick as fast as I can. Yeah. Okay. Here we go. So, in terms, that's goals for. I want expected goals. Here we go. The Ducks expected goals. They're only 27th in the league over the last 2 months. So, not bad. Better than the Toronto Maple Leafs over the last 2 months. So that's something.
Oh, jeez. Don't tell Toronto that.
Better than the Flames. Better than the Lightning. Better than the Rangers. Flames
are kind of in the similar boat as us. Their goaltenders carrying them.
Yeah, it's that's why the games against the Flames have been so frustrating, because they're both games the Ducks, if they had won, they'd be more legitimately in the talk. But they're also games that were just so frustrating because, like, Calgary plays such a muck it up style of hockey that just it is impossible to do anything smoothly, and so that worked for Calgary because the goaltender plays well and you limit the chances, you're going to win some games. But anyway,
I think that does
drag
it
this
then.
on too long. Or we could keep pulling a Taylor and just say, hey,
I know.
we're gonna get off here in a second, but and then,
But hey, if we stop right now, we're at an hour even, so that's pretty good for my OCD.
All right, let's go with that. All right. Thanks everyone for watching another episode of Wings on Katella. I'm Thomas Murray, joined by Jack Janes, Zach Kavanaugh, and Taylor Blake Ward, who took a lot longer to leave than he said he would. Take care, everyone. Have a good weekend.